Perhaps the one word that I could use to describe the average Christian mom today is busy, or maybe even overwhelmed.
A very tired, stressed out master juggler.
There seems to be a higher expectation on mom many times than there is dad.
She has more duties and responsibilities than any human being should have or can handle reasonably.
And it's unfair because they get no private time to themselves, and sometimes then family time as a whole, dads, kids, teenager, doesn't matter, they all get shoved because mom is so worn out.
And in our culture these days, part of that also now includes having a job.
So many moms work, but yet they're still involved in the lives of their kids and they're managing their home. Not to mention single moms.
It used to be, when I was a kid, that divorce was an anomaly. Now, I grew up, in a single parent home with my mom being the one that was doing all the raising of us and trying to nurture us in terms of faith. And I think today that's not the exception. That's unfortunately the role and the norm.
It makes it extremely difficult because many of these moms still carry on the traditional role of taking care of her home.
It's a very difficult job, partly because in most Christian households, the mother is the spiritual head of the household. And so not only is she taking care of the physical and emotional needs of the kids to the greatest extent, and dealing with the household itself, and doing the job, and dealing with the physical and medical needs of all the kids. But and in most cases now, oddly enough, also dealing with all the financial and economic transactions for the household. But she is also the spiritual head of the household, much more concerned about the faith of her children and how that gets practiced, how that gets built, how it gets integrated. So it's a very difficult thing.
For moms today, I just think that they can play such a great role in shaping and encouraging their kids, some out of necessity, others are just wonderfully geared to build a great relationship with their kids, which provides then the platform for sharing their faith with their child.
When we think about connecting with our kids, it can seem overwhelming. I can't become this superstar overnight. I can't put this kind of effort. I can't even figure out how to do it. It's even more difficult at times if you're a single mom. My mom was a single mom, and it was tough.
Moms just have such a big job ahead of them, taking care of all their responsibilities and yet trying to engage in the lives of their children.
In Deuteronomy 6, God is really, really clear that passing on these truths to their kids is not something that happens just by being in the same house with them.
This verse is all about, us actively engaging our kids in terms of being the spiritual trainer. But I think it's also a beautiful picture of relational ministry, not just intellectual. That's where so many of us, I think, feel so ill prepared. Well, I don't know enough. Well, you know enough when you're driving in the car to ask them about their day, and before they get out of the car, to pray for them.
What we need to understand is we do not form relationships simply by being in proximity to each other. We need to actively find the time to be together, to share these stories of our lives together so that it actually gets done. And everything else needs to fall in around it. It needs to be priority.
I would say the same thing to mothers that I would say to fathers. You have to understand this is your biggest responsibility, your most significant task in life. There is nothing that compares to this.
Your whole family depends upon it. It's not something that you can just pass off and say, hey, this is too hard. This is central to your being as a Christian. You need to get these things passed on to your kids.
Take that so seriously. I mean, there's nothing that's more important. Recognize that it's your full-time job, it's your first job, and it's ultimately one of the only things that will matter after you die. Perhaps the only thing that will matter. Who did your kids become? They are your legacy.